So what you've seen is, again, from these documents, is the Israeli Navy dispersing from the big port at Haifa. It's moving some of its nuclear-capable missiles out of the way into hiding, into underground bunkers, we presume. It doesn't make quite clear what they're doing with them, but it's certainly dispersing them. So it's preparing for an Iranian response.
So we've had this leak of US intelligence documents, and it suggests that Israel has been planning for a retaliation to Iran. What was included in these documents, and what do we know so far?
So these documents come from something called the Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which is a posh name for a bit of the Pentagon that looks at satellite pictures, and it looks at 2 days, October the 15th and 16th last week, and what Israel was up to in its military bases, basically. And there are 2 pages for this document. There are no satellite pictures in it. There's just the analysis of what was seen. It focuses on the fact that there were some kind of military exercises being conducted that involved fighter bombers armed with airborne ballistic missiles, 16 Golden Horizon ballistic missiles, and also 40 ISO-2 missiles, bombs, which is, and they're a new type of bomb that's come onto the market. They're American supplied. They came on the market in the last few years. They have been used once or twice before. But, their precise, capabilities aren't fully studied. But the important thing is that overall, this picture, along with, the other thing they had was refueling tankers. So these are planes, they're going to be flying a long way, for example, to Iran. They'll need refueling, and they're going to drop bombs and also fire from presumably further off ballistic missiles. The important thing is the size of this package, if you like. If that's all that Israel's going to do, then that kind of falls in the medium range of what Israel's retaliation could be. There's no indication from that they're going to try and wipe out Iran's nuclear program, which would require much more firepower than that. The documents themselves compare it to a strike in September on Yemen, where Israel retaliated for a drone attack on Israel by the Houthi rebels, who are an Iran-backed group in Yemen, who've also been attacking Western shipping and shipping that's heading for Israel in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. So that would not be a huge operation, be substantial. Those are, quite big armaments. Partly would depend, of course, on where they were aimed at, and the assumption is if they all got through, of course, they could do quite a substantial amount of damage to Iranian military bases. But that would be medium level response by Iran, as it wouldn't be a total destruction of its nuclear program, which is what America is afraid that Israel will try to do. So the only question really is, was there anything else that Israel is planning that wasn't picked up? I suppose it's possible that there were other exercises, other military bases, but then you'll think, well, why was this leaked and not that? But then there's also the question of assassinations, cyber attacks, both of which are things that Israel have done pretty successfully against Iran in the past. So combine all those together with with what was picked up by this intelligence, then you've got a fairly substantial attack.
And as you mentioned, there wasn't any indications about what or where they were targeting. But could we take an educated guess as to where this attack may take place? And also, when we talk about the scale of this attack as well, could you give us some detail into the impact that last attack had in Yemen?
Well, this is the $1 million question. The Yemen attack was just basically attacked the port at Hodeidah, the big port in Yemen, which is the main supply line to the country as a whole, particularly during the civil war. When Yemen has become divided, Hodeidah is the main port serving the north of the country, which is the area that's Houthi controlled. So that's where its food comes in from, but it's also where it's getting, one assumes, its weapons from Iran. The Houthis are getting their weapons from Iran. So that was a fairly significant but concentrated blow. There were other sites hit as well. as you say, the $1 million question is what targets are they trying to hit? Now, obviously, if they went after Iran's oil installations, for example, uh, this kind of weaponry can cause an enormous amount of damage to Iran's main oil refinery at Karg Island or its port at Bandar Abbas and other places associated with the oil industry. I mean, you could really do a substantial amount of damage because oil facilities by their nature are quite concentrated. Now, if you were going to go after the entire extent of Iran's military program, you'll probably need to use more than this to take out all of it, unless you were very clever. And I say unless there are other things which haven't been picked up by the satellite imagery. My assumption, if this is the extent of it, is that there's going to be, as I say, there's probably going to be a combined attack involving, maybe a longer range assassination program, but a cyber attack and this program together could, between them, cause a severe weakening of Iran's military installations if it's successful, and Israel tend to be quite successful at these operations. So I suspect that's what we're looking at is a degrading of Iran's military abilities, but not a total wipeout.
And another big question is when would this potential attack happen? And it's been around 3 weeks since Iran fired around 180 ballistic missiles at Israeli cities and bases. And we haven't seen a retaliation yet. But why do you think it's potentially taken so long so far?
Well, I think they want to keep the suspense going, and of course, what we have to remember about Israel is that because Israel fights wars on so many fronts, we tend to divide them up. I mean, partly the attention span of the media and its users, likes the idea of breaking it up, so we don't get bored with Gaza and then don't get bored with Lebanon, so let's all move on to Iran. Um, that's how we operate, but of course Israel sees it very differently. Israel and the Israelis, for them it's much more integrated. So, one advantage for them, I mean, it's a kind of fairly crude, calculated advantage. If you have these wars on different fronts, you can distract from what you're doing on one front with diverting attention to another front. So at the moment, it's conducting a war on two fronts already with Gaza and Lebanon, and having a lot of attention over a long period of time, focusing on the Iran threat and so on. Is distracting people in the West, particularly from bad publicity for what's happening in Gaza. And the publicity is now pretty bad for Israel. The Western powers are kind of fed up with what Israel is doing in Gaza, let alone everybody who isn't naturally a friend of Israel. So the longer you can string that out, the more you can get on with what you want to do in Gaza and Lebanon with attention somewhat distracted.
Do you think that this intelligence leak could impact or delay Israel's response to Iran?
Yeah, there's a lot of people, because the leak doesn't show anything hugely surprising. This is pretty much what we'd expect Israel to be doing, preparing for carrying out exercises in advance of a multi-pronged attack on Iran. So there's been a lot of attention on why these documents leaked. Was it a someone who didn't like Israel, who wanted to leak to Iran as a warning to them, or my slightly more, I mean, individual response. I haven't seen many other people coming up with this, but it seems most likely to me is that this is a kind of semi-deliberate leak, if you like, that serves as a warning to Israel, and particularly the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, which the White House doesn't like very much, to say, we've discussed this. We know what we think. We know what you're doing. You've told us what you said you're going to do. We're just keeping an eye on you and making sure that your preparations are indeed what you've told us they are. We're keeping an eye on things. That's my suspicion. So I think that's the aim, is sort of to try and keep Netanyahu on the to the agreement he's made clearly with President Biden over what his response will be. Biden said himself on Friday that he knew what Israel was going to do and when, but wasn't going to tell anyone. So I suspect it hasn't change things that much. I may be wrong. It may be that Israel wants to get on with it now because it's afraid of more leaks. But I suspect this is slightly choreographed, and Israel will do it in its own time, which I guess won't be too far off. But it's never any great hurry. There's no particular reason to hurry these things.
Mm. And if you are correct with that theory, what do you think this says about the relationship between Netanyahu and Biden?
Well, I think the important thing to remember. I mean, so much is written about Israel and America as if it's just as if they're a constant, and it is a fairly constant relationship with American support for Israel, at least in the last couple of decades. But that is subject to the vagaries of individuals and individual administrations. Netanyahu is a very tough cookie. That's one way of putting it. He's very good at manipulating public opinion. He's very good at manipulating the people he works with. He's a very canny political operator. He's been Prime Minister of Israel on and off since 1996. He was first elected. Even before that, he was very well versed in American politics. He'd been a diplomat in Washington, and he'd been educated in America. He's obviously fully bilingual, as we all know. He understands how American politics works, and he uses that to his advantage, and as he sees it, Israel's advantage. So he's very good at sort of striking a deal with not just his enemies, but who he doesn't strike deals with, but with his friends, like America. He's done the same with Britain in the past, where you think you've got a deal, and then he's always pushing that extra mile where he's left a little loophole for himself. And that kind of infuriates his partners in the West. It's infuriated British foreign ministers in the past, and it's infuriated presidents of America in the past. So Biden is a long-standing friend of Israel. There's never any doubt that he's not going to. There's never any doubt that he's going to support Israel. At the end of the day, he's carried on the weapons supplies. He's made it fairly clear that whatever happens, that will continue. So if he's not going to end the weapons supplies, what leverage does he have over Netanyahu to show that he's aware of this tendency in the way Netanyahu operates and try to limit it? And this is, if I am right, I mean, it's only a conspiracy theory, but if I am right, then this is one way. Well, it's one way that if I were president, that I would use.
In terms of what we know so far and what's suggested in these intelligence documents, and especially looking at the scale at which this promised attack could happen on Iran, what would be the significance of this attack, especially in terms of the war so far?
Right. So this is, it has been pretty clear from the night of that ballistic missile attack that this is a key moment, not only for the Gaza war, but for the Middle East, perhaps the wider world. We've talked about this since the beginning of this conflict in Gaza. What is the chance of this escalating into a wider war? There are voices in Israel, there are voices in Washington that say that Iran is the single casus belli. Is the motive factor that threatens Israel, therefore threatens, in American and Israeli views, peace in the Middle East. That if you somehow defang Iran, the Islamic Republic, which has the destruction of Israel as part of its core ideology, and to achieve which it's funded all these militias across the Middle East, in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, now Yemen. Certainly the Hamas and Hezbollah, most importantly at the moment. If you defang Iran, you can really reshape the Middle East and lower the threat to Israel. And if you're an idealist, then maybe try and create a more peaceful Middle East at the end of it. That's the hawkish view. The dovish view, which is the view of President Biden, is that if you try and do that, there will be a massive reaction. Iran will attack American interests across the Middle East, including American allies. America has bases within very close range of Iran. It has central command. One of the three main branches of the American military is based in Qatar. It's got the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. It's got military bases elsewhere. Very easy targets for Iran and, of course, its allies as well. Saudi Arabia, UAE. are all very close to Iran. So so Biden is saying don't do anything that would trigger an Iranian escalation into all-out war. The idea that Iran would say, well, if you're going to come after us as a regime, try and topple us as the Islamic Republic, we will go down fighting. That's a very dangerous moment for the Middle East. But there are voices pushing to call Iran's bluff, as they see it, on that one. So this is why we are where we are in these negotiations. As I say, underlying this leak, in my view, is my view, and it's only speculation, but it seems to be what I would read from these documents and the way they were leaked, is that Biden has won an agreement from Netanyahu that Netanyahu will push his response to the limits of what Iran can accept without broadening the war. So I think if he does this, and again, this is the other thing the documents show, is how Israel is preparing for a response. I think the agreement is that Israel will strike Iran in such a way that if Iran does retaliate, it will only retaliate again by striking back at Israel. So what you've seen is, again, from these documents, is the Israeli Navy dispersing from the big port at Haifa. It's moving some of its nuclear-capable missiles out of the way into hiding, into underground bunkers, we presume. It doesn't make quite clear what they're doing with them, but it's certainly dispersing them. So it's preparing for an Iranian response on Israel. My suspicion is that this implies, the corollary is this implies that the deal that Biden has struck with Netanyahu is that there won't be an attack of the scale that would broaden the war. That's my reading of this, but it's speculation. But that's what I would read from these documents. It's a pleasure.